Originally, the series was going to be a bunch of parts that would show me adding features to my game as I go through development. And I didn't want to get all technical about how everything works because I don't really consider myself to be a professional by any means. But after my last video ended up being way too short to do anything with, I decided that I need to start writing scripts out for these videos. And I also realized that this is an opportunity to consolidate all the information I've learned in the process of getting to this point. Making sure I know it well enough to explain will help me get better at it. So when you're making a multiplayer game, you'll need to decide between using dedicated or listen servers. Most big games like Counter-Strike, Apex Legends, Valorant, etc. will use dedicated servers since they're competitive games and everyone needs to connect to the same point. When you use a listen server, one of the player machines acts as a host to the server while playing, and everyone else connects to their machine. This makes listen servers less ideal for highly competitive games like the ones mentioned before, not only because the host machine has the potential to cheat more easily, but also because they have zero ping. But that can be made negligible with server-side rewind, which could probably be the topic of its own video. Essentially, the client says where and when it hit a player, and the server rewinds the time to see if that would have been a possible hit, given the location of the players and the bullets on the server. All multiplayer games need this since there's a slight delay between what is happening on the client side and the server side. I'm only using listen servers, at least for now, since there's no running cost for a game with listen servers. If you look at how much it costs to run virtual machines, you'd quickly realize that a multiplayer game with an active player base needs to be already actively making money to justify the costs of maintenance alone, and that's before you even try to make a profit. And I'm sure you've heard of games like Concord and Spectre Divide, which died because of this. Using a listen server means I don't gotta worry about none of that, and I can focus on actually making the game fun. Now, when you're programming for a multiplayer game, you want to make sure that everything is being done on the server and is replicated down to the client. Basically, when you're a client connecting to a multiplayer game and you see stuff happening in the game on your screen, it's not actually happening on your machine. It's all happening on the server. And the effect is shown on everyone's machine at the exact same time. This might seem like the same thing, but it's not, for the simple reason that you actually have to program it to happen in multiple parts. Now, saying it's not actually happening on your machine is a bit vague and maybe not fully accurate. Let's take health as an example. When you take damage, your health and the amount of damage taken are all calculated on the server. Then that number is updated on your HUD. But the number itself is stored and calculated on the server, as opposed to each machine calculating their own health separately. The server is authoritative and makes the big decisions like that. Only the effect of it is actually happening on your end. Hopefully that's clear and understandable. Now for an update on the game. Since last time, I've added weapon firing, along with creating a muzzle flash, a tracer, and an impact particle effect. And I'm going to add more impact particles, which will depend on the type of object we hit eventually. I opted for a projectile weapon system, which sends an actual object flying through the air instead of just using a line trace. I made it so your gun ejects bullet shells, and I added a crosshair, and I've started working on the HUD. I finally corrected the gun rotation so it points towards the center of the screen. It's not line perfect, but you'll have to excuse it for now. It looks decent enough, and I'm only one person. This had its own issue where it would sometimes turn in an unnatural way because the hit target is coming from the camera, and the weapon is turning to look at what the camera is pointed at. So I separated the line trace for the animation and the line trace for the actual bullet. The line trace for the animation isn't really even a line, but rather a single point in the distance that the gun will point at. Then when you shoot, you perform a separate line trace from the camera to the crosshair, so the bullets will go to the crosshair. I also pushed the line trace forward so that the bullets always come from the front of the character, since the line trace comes from the camera which is behind them. This stops us from shooting at things that are behind us. I added a hit animation which I will eventually make directional, and the same goes for death animations. I added a health variable and a HUD for that. When the health goes down to 0, the death animations play. I still need to handle what happens after that, which I'll have to get back to you on in the next update. I also need to add audio, but I want to implement a whole system for that, so that's why I've left it out for now. So by the next update, I'm hoping to have the basic game loop taken care of, dying, respawning, and reloading, ammo, etc. Then I can start working on different weapon types, but for now, the game is just going to have a pistol, a rifle, and a shotgun. Pistols will need their own animation pose, and shotgun will need its own logic for shooting, since it's basically shooting a bunch of mini bullets all at once. After all of that, I can make a lag compensation component, and then the very basic foundation of the game will be set, and the real stuff can start happening. Subscribe to follow along, like if you want to see more, comment what you think down below.